What could make a beloved TV icon like Susan Dey turn her back on the show that made her a star, and refuse to even speak about it for decades? The answer lies in a shocking betrayal by a co-star you'd never expect. It's not just about old drama. It's about a line that was crossed so deeply, she never looked back. Stick around, because once you know the truth, you'll never see the Partridge Family the same way again. They were once the embodiment of family fun and youthful harmony, faces that defined a generation of television. But behind the glowing smiles and upbeat melodies, a far more intricate story was being quietly written. As the world tuned in each week to the Partridge Family, captivated by their musical adventures and matching jumpsuits, one star was slipping further from the spotlight. Not for lack of popularity, but because of a complicated emotional storm brewing beneath the surface. The silence surrounding Susan Dey's decision to decline the long-anticipated reunion left many fans baffled, until whispers began to reveal the painful truth she had carried for years. When Susan Dey joined the cast of the Partridge Family in 1970, she was just 17, and still finding her footing in the entertainment world. With a modeling background and minimal acting experience, she was thrust into the national spotlight nearly overnight. As Laurie Partridge, she radiated charm, innocence, and warmth, the kind of girl every teenager wanted to be, and every parent wanted their daughter to emulate. Her beauty and grace lit up screens across the country, and her image soon adorned everything from lunchboxes to magazine covers. The nation embraced her as their sweetheart, but what fans couldn't see was that the world she was living in was far more complicated than the pastel colors and catchy tunes suggested. Fame, especially when it arrives so suddenly and so young, is never just glitter and applause. While viewers were absorbed by the cheerful on-screen family dynamics, the real-life pressures of maintaining that image were already starting to wear Susan down. As the show's popularity soared, so did the expectations, both from the public and from within herself. The polished image of Laurie Partridge became a mask she had to wear daily, even as her own identity felt increasingly distant. Behind the scenes, that pressure was magnified by the unique challenges of being a teenager in an adult world. Surrounded by cameras, contracts, and the constant buzz of an entertainment machine, the show's set, though outwardly a place of laughter and music, hid tensions and emotional turmoil that were rarely acknowledged. The young cast found themselves trapped between adolescence and stardom, struggling to understand who they were beneath the personas they portrayed. Even David Cassidy, the breakout heartthrob of the show, insisted in interviews that the cast shared a familial bond. He spoke warmly of Susan, of Shirley Jones, who played their mother, and of Danny Bonaduce, the mischievous younger brother. But kind words and nostalgic memories couldn't erase the complexities that quietly shaped their off-screen relationships. Susan and David shared something unique, a closeness that was hard to define. On camera, they played siblings with effortless chemistry. Off camera, their dynamic was marked by both connection and distance. Susan, introspective and emotionally attuned, found herself drawn to David in ways that extended beyond their roles. But David, basking in a tidal wave of fame and admirers, maintained a guarded distance. It wasn't a deliberate rejection, more a reflection of the immense pressure he faced, and his desire to keep his personal life untangled from the whirlwind around him. There were glances that lasted a moment too long, shared silences between takes, and the kind of subtle tension that comes from unspoken feelings. Susan's admiration for David grew slowly, becoming a quiet part of her daily reality. And though they never crossed a boundary that would disrupt the show's image, her emotional attachment ran deep. Still, she kept it hidden, buried beneath layers of professionalism, silence, and the ongoing demand to play her part as America's sweetheart. While the world saw David Cassidy as the effortless teen icon, Susan saw something more, a vulnerability, a depth that only those closest to him might glimpse. Her affection wasn't a tabloid romance, it was something she protected from the cameras and the chaos. But the more she felt, the more she struggled with the reality that her emotions couldn't be returned in the way she hoped. And over time, that quiet heartache began to carve a space between them. Their differing personalities only deepened the divide. David was charismatic, outgoing, a natural performer. Susan, by contrast, was more private, thoughtful, even cautious. Their relationship, so seamless on television, was marked off-screen by misunderstandings and quiet frustrations. What could have been a beautiful friendship became strained by the weight of unresolved feelings and the rigid expectations placed upon them by the industry. In a world where even their smiles had to be rehearsed, sincerity often came at a cost. And yet, despite all the personal struggles and backstage drama, Susan remained dedicated to her role. Her portrayal of Laurie Partridge became iconic, even as it pulled her further from her true self. With each episode, she embodied the very image that millions adored, while the real Susan Dey slowly faded into the background, unseen by the cameras that captured her every move. As the show continued its celebrated run and eventually cemented its place in television history, Susan carried with her the memories, bittersweet and tangled. She remembered the whirlwind tours, the pressure to be perfect, and the moments she shared with David that never made it to screen. She remembered the silent moments, the weight of expectations, and the way her heart quietly broke, not because of scandal, but because of the complicated beauty of growing up too fast, in front of everyone, yet feeling so alone. By the time the idea of a reunion was floated, the emotional cost of returning to that world was simply too high for her. Susan Dey had moved on, not just from a television show, but from the girl she once was. She had outgrown the fame, the facade, and perhaps even the need to explain why. And yet, the mystery of her absence left fans wondering, what really happened between her and David? Why wouldn't she return to a show that gave her so much? In the silence she left behind, the audience found something even more compelling than a scripted reunion. A real human story, shaped by youth, fame, love, and the quiet pain of what could never be said aloud. He was the heartthrob of a generation, and she, the quiet star with a storm beneath the surface. David's charm was impossible to miss, a magnetic force on and off the set. But while fans speculated about a possible romance blooming behind the scenes, the truth was far more complicated. David, with all his warmth and teasing smiles, kept a line firmly drawn. He later admitted that any deeper connection with Susan felt too risky, too messy. He was acutely aware that one wrong move could shatter the carefully maintained image the show depended on. For Susan, that boundary wasn't a shield. It was a wall, one she never had the power to break down. The silence between them became more telling than any on-screen chemistry. She carried that silence with her, a silent ache dressed in professional grace, while the cameras kept rolling and the fans kept watching. Even as she tried to keep her emotions hidden, they seeped into every gesture and glance. Her pain was never loud, but it lingered. It shaped her in quiet, invisible ways. While the world cheered for the Partridge Family, Susan was learning how to bury feelings that had nowhere to go. Love, when it has no place to land, becomes something else entirely. Bittersweet memory wrapped in fame's heavy cloak. And as years passed, that memory faded from public view, but not from her own. The echoes of what could have been stayed tucked beneath her performances, beneath her perfectly timed smiles. Sometimes the most haunting stories are the ones never told aloud. Then came the moment that cracked everything open. Years after the show had faded into television history, long after the screaming fans and colorful buses, David released his autobiography. Titled, "Could It Be Forever?" It promised honesty, confession, and behind-the-scenes truth. Within its pages were the expected tales of fame and frenzy. But one particular revelation sent ripples through more than just the fan base. In a single passage, vague and casually placed, David claimed that he and Susan had once shared a night together. No dramatic build-up, no emotional context, just a memory, offered up like any other anecdote. But for Susan, that sentence hit like a cold wind. It wasn't just about what he wrote. It was about what he exposed. A part of her past, raw and personal, suddenly became public domain. She hadn't given permission. She hadn't even been warned. That fleeting moment David described might have faded into the background for him. But for Susan, it reopened a wound she had worked so hard to heal. The heartbreak she had carried privately was now subject to speculation, gossip, and headlines, and she didn't respond. Not a word, not a denial or a confirmation. But her silence wasn't passive, it was powerful. When words are too heavy, sometimes silence is the only way to be heard. The distance between them became unbridgeable. She had spent decades separating herself from the girl the world once knew, and this public betrayal sent her further down that path. Fans wondered why she never reunited with her old co-stars, why she kept her distance from anniversary specials and nostalgic retrospectives. But Susan wasn't avoiding her past, she was protecting her peace. After all, when a chapter of your life is constantly rewritten by someone else, how do you reclaim it? Sometimes the only answer is to walk away and never look back. She did more than walk away. She reinvented herself. When the Partridge Family ended in 1974, the easy path would have been to ride the wave of fame. But Susan wasn't interested in playing variations of Laurie Partridge for the rest of her life. She knew she had more to offer. Her turning point came with L.A. Law in the mid-1980s. As Grace Van Owen, she stepped into a role that was bold, complex, and fiercely intelligent. It wasn't just a job, it was a declaration. She could carry serious drama. She could win a Golden Globe. And she did. She left behind the bubblegum image and stepped into a world where her talent could finally take center stage. But even as her career soared, the world wouldn't let go of the Partridge Family. In the 1990s, nostalgia was back in full swing. Networks pushed for reunion specials. VH1 lined up interviews. Message boards buzzed with fan excitement. Everyone wanted one more moment with their favorite TV family. And while her co-stars hinted at interest, Susan stayed silent. No statements, no cameos, no nod to the past. It baffled some fans, but it also made people listen more closely, because that kind of silence speaks volumes. In an era where celebrity stories are constantly recycled, repackaged, and sold back to the public, Susan Dey's refusal to engage was a quiet act of defiance. She didn't owe the world an explanation. She had lived her story. She had survived its scars, and now she was writing the ending on her own terms. Every time the spotlight tried to pull her back in, she gently, resolutely stepped away, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. The past could stay where it belonged. Not everything needed to be reopened. Some memories are better left untouched, especially when they've already taken so much. In a world where fame often comes at the cost of truth, Susan Dey chose something much rarer: dignity. And maybe that's the greatest plot twist of all. Not what happened between her and David, but the strength she found in moving forward without needing to relive it. The story behind Susan Dey's firm decision to steer clear of any Partridge Family reunion wasn't just a case of fading fame or disinterest. It was rooted in something far more intimate, something personal that had never truly healed. While the public assumed she simply moved on from her days as Laurie Partridge, those closest to her knew it was a quiet act of resistance, a silent stand against a betrayal she never saw coming from David Cassidy, the co-star who once held a unique place in her life. That betrayal didn't begin with a failed romance. It began with trust, the kind you can never rebuild once it's broken. And the damage wasn't from what happened behind closed doors, but what Cassidy chose to make public. One casual chapter in David's autobiography was all it took to destroy a bond. He'd written about a private evening they once shared, something that, to him, seemed inconsequential. But for Susan, it cracked her world wide open. That memory wasn't meant for fans or bookstores. It was supposed to stay between them. But there it was, printed in ink, part of a narrative that belonged to him alone. Susan never spoke out about it publicly. She didn't lash out or start a media frenzy. Instead, she stepped away from reunion offers, from nostalgic retrospectives, from anything that might force her to relive a time when her trust was shattered in the most public of ways. For Susan, pretending that everything was fine, standing next to Cassidy for a warm, smiling cast photo, would have been a betrayal of herself. The thought of playing nice for the cameras, for a network special or fan event, felt wrong, not because she was bitter, but because she valued her own truth too much to mask it. When fans hoped to see the Partridge Family together again, they missed one crucial thing. Some stories are too sacred to repackage for entertainment. And when David Cassidy passed away in 2017, the world paused. fans posted heartfelt memories, celebrated his music, and remembered the wide-eyed boy from the hit 70s series. But Susan's silence during that time said more than any eulogy. She didn't tweet, she didn't speak to the press, and she didn't join the wave of tributes that followed. It wasn't out of hate, it was about self-preservation, about maintaining the boundaries she'd fought so long to protect. In a world quick to forgive and forget for the sake of nostalgia, Susan chose something much harder: to grieve privately, without the spotlight, and without rewriting history for anyone's comfort. Even as TV specials and reunion projects came and went, Susan's absence remained the one constant. And that absence wasn't a mystery. It was a quiet decision to step away from a narrative that no longer served her. She had no desire to re-enter a world that had once reduced her personal experiences into footnotes for someone else's story. In interviews, cast members sometimes danced around the issue, hoped she'd change her mind. But for Susan, the door had long since closed. Behind it, she had built a life that belonged entirely to her. The heartbreak wasn't about a lost relationship. It was about a sacred trust being turned into a story for the masses. Pain doesn't fade with time. It evolves into caution, into quiet resilience. She had nothing to prove, no need to offer a final statement or relive a history that had already cost her enough. Her refusal to reunite was not a protest, it was an act of dignity, one that taught us not every chapter deserves a sequel, not every wound is meant for the spotlight. And while Susan's story is one of emotional strength, also a lesson in how to take control of your own legacy, something she's done with remarkable clarity. After her exit from acting, she pursued a life far from Hollywood's glare. While others courted nostalgia, Susan quietly invested in herself. She's been known to live modestly compared to many of her peers, but at one point, she did indulge in the rewards of her hard work. Among her known luxury assets was a sleek black Jaguar XJ and a classic Mercedes SL convertible, symbols of her prime years of success. She was occasionally seen wearing Cartier and Omega timepieces during her red carpet days, and once owned a stunning Beverly Hills property, complete with private gardens and seclusion from paparazzi. She never flaunted it. She managed her wealth with care. Behind the scenes, Susan invested in real estate and quietly contributed to charitable projects related to mental health and women's empowerment. She never became the face of a major brand or launched a fashion line, but she made thoughtful financial moves, even holding comprehensive insurance policies to protect her assets and health. Typical of someone who understood the unpredictability of fame. While others chased endorsements and headlines, Susan protected her future quietly, with the grace of someone who had seen the cost of fame up close. Financial story isn't about lavish spending. It's about intention, privacy, and knowing when to say no. Looking back, Susan Dey's journey is one of quiet strength and difficult decisions. Her past was filled with iconic moments, but her present reflects a woman who chose peace over applause. And that choice, though often misunderstood, is one of the most powerful lessons Hollywood can offer. Not every reunion brings healing. Not every story needs retelling, and not every silence is empty. Sometimes it's where the truth finally finds a place to breathe. So as fans continue to wish for that picture-perfect reunion, we're reminded that real healing doesn't always happen under stage lights. It happens behind closed doors, far from the camera's gaze. Have you ever walked away from something that no longer served your peace, even when the world expected you to return? That's the real story behind Susan Dey's silent goodbye to the Partridge Family. Not bitterness, but boundary. From the heartbreak of broken trust to building a quiet, powerful life on her own terms, Susan showed us that sometimes walking away is the bravest choice of all. If you love diving into this untold chapter of Hollywood history, give us a like, drop your thoughts in the comments, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next. We've got more classic TV secrets and shocking celeb revelations on the way. And hey, if Susan taught us anything, it's this: you don't need a reunion to leave a legacy. Sometimes, the strongest voices are the ones that choose silence. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and stay tuned.